The massive alien vessel darkened the skies over Edinburgh as it descended through thick, rolling clouds. It was the fifth such ship to arrive in the past 24 hours, joining others that had positioned themselves over major cities across the globe. The world had watched in horrified fascination as the vessels appeared first over Tokyo, then New York, Moscow, and Cairo. Captain James McTavish stood on the ramparts of Edinburgh Castle, binoculars trained on the colossal ship. Unlike the other commanding officers who had been caught off guard, he had been waiting. The Highland Regiment had prepared for this moment ever since the first anomalous signals were detected 3 months ago. "They're deploying transport vessels, sir," Lieutenant Ross reported, pointing to smaller craft emerging from the mothership's underbelly. James nodded grimly. "Just as expected. Alert the clans." With those 4 words, an ancient system, modernized but never abandoned, sprang to life. Across the Highlands of Scotland, from Inverness to Perth, from the Isle of Skye to Aberdeen, beacons were lit and digital signals transmitted. The Highland Regiments, officially the Scottish division of the British Army but still organized along traditional clan structures, mobilized with practiced efficiency. The aliens, the Voidborn, as they called themselves in the transmission that had preceded their arrival, had demanded Earth's surrender. They promised fair treatment if humanity submitted, extinction if they resisted. Most global powers had hesitated, uncertain how to respond to a technologically superior foe. But not the Scots, not the Highlanders. They'd never fought someone who refused to lose, James muttered, watching the landing craft approach the city center. Below in the old town, civilians were being evacuated through underground passages dating back to the 17th century. Secret routes once used for smuggling, now serving as escape tunnels. The remaining population, those who had refused evacuation, were not helpless bystanders. Each had a role in the defense plan that had been meticulously crafted by generations of military strategists who understood one thing perfectly: the defense of difficult terrain against superior forces. The first Voidborn troops emerged from their landing craft in the meadows, a large park south of the castle. They were tall, armored beings, moving with a fluid grace that suggested both extraordinary strength and unfamiliarity with Earth's gravity. Their weapons, glowing pulse rifles and energy shields, confirmed humanity's technological disadvantage. James gave the signal, and the first phase of the defense began. Snipers positioned across the city's rooftops and in the hills beyond opened fire, not with standard rifles. Those had proven ineffective against the aliens' armor in the early skirmishes in Tokyo, but with specially modified electromagnetic pulse weapons developed by Scottish engineers working in conjunction with military researchers. The first wave of aliens faltered as their systems malfunctioned. Their communications, their weapons, even their armor support systems were vulnerable to the precisely calibrated EMPs. The Voidborn commanders, visible by their distinctive crested helmets, seemed surprised by this tactical response. They expected submission or conventional warfare, James observed. They've never encountered asymmetric resistance from a people who've spent centuries perfecting it. The second phase began as Highland fighters emerged from hidden positions throughout the city. These weren't just soldiers but civilians trained in guerrilla tactics, shopkeepers, teachers, and farmers who had maintained the ancient warrior traditions. They struck quickly, targeting vulnerable aliens whose systems were compromised, then disappeared into the city's maze of narrow closes and underground vaults. The Voidborn responded with brutal force, unleashing energy weapons that scorched buildings and streets. But they were fighting against an enemy who knew every corner, every passageway, every escape route in a city built on 7 hills and layered through centuries of construction. Lieutenant Ross returned with reports from other global fronts. Tokyo has fallen. New York is holding barely. Moscow reports heavy casualties. James nodded, then pointed to the mothership. We don't need to win everywhere. We just need to win here. The third phase of the defense plan was the most audacious. While the ground forces engaged the aliens in the city, drawing their attention and resources, a separate team of Highland commandos had infiltrated the area beneath the mothership's landing zone. They were attempting something that military strategists elsewhere had dismissed as impossible, capturing one of the alien vessels. Hours passed. The fight for Edinburgh's streets grew fierce. The aliens, recovering from their initial setbacks, began adapting to the Highlanders' tactics, but they were fighting an enemy forged by centuries of conflict, who had turned difficult terrain and stubborn resistance into an art form. Just as the situation seemed to be turning against the defenders, a massive explosion rocked the mothership above. Alarms blared across alien frequencies. The commandos had succeeded. They had triggered a cascade failure in the ship's propulsion system. The massive vessel listed to one side, its stabilizers failing. The Voidborn troops on the ground faltered, their command structure disrupted. James seized the moment, ordering a full counterattack. Highland fighters emerged from every corner of the city, overwhelming the disorganized aliens. By nightfall, the Edinburgh mothership had crashed into the North Sea, and the alien ground forces had been captured or eliminated. Reports began coming in from around the world. The unexpected success in Scotland had provided other resistance forces with critical intelligence about Voidborn vulnerabilities. 1 week later, James stood again on the castle ramparts, surveying the damaged but defiant city. Representatives from global military powers had gathered to learn from the Highland victory, the first decisive human triumph against the invaders. Why did they succeed here when they failed elsewhere? An American general asked. James gazed over the ancient fortress, the winding streets, the hills beyond. They came expecting an easy conquest or a conventional war. Instead, they'd found a people who had never forgotten how to fight against overwhelming odds. He smiled slightly. The Highlands have never been conquered. Not by the Romans, not by the English, not for long by anyone. The aliens simply joined a very long list. The battle for Earth was far from over, but the Voidborn had learned a crucial lesson. Humanity would not surrender, and some corners of this world had been preparing for this fight for centuries, without even knowing it. As James watched new beacons being lit across the hills, he knew that an army had indeed come for Earth, but the Highlanders had answered, and in doing so, had given humanity its first hope of victory.